Hello everyone and welcome back to the YouTube video. So in today's video, what we're going to be doing is building a RESTful API in Python using the module called Flask. Now for anyone unfamiliar with Flask, not only can you make websites with Python using Flask, but you can also make REST APIs, which is what we're going to be doing in this video. It's really known for making micro web services because it's a very lightweight module. It doesn't come with a ton of things in the box, but for our purpose, that is perfect because there's a lot less setup we need to do, and it's really fast, only a few lines of code to actually initialize Flask and start using it to make an API. Now, for anyone that's unfamiliar with the term REST or the term API, I'll quickly define them for you. So REST stands for Representational State Transfer. You'll see why that's important in a second. And API stands for Application Programming Interface. Essentially, what a REST API is a way for other programs or applications to manipulate or query or update or delete or whatever it may be information. So it's a way to deal with some kind of data in a structured format. Now, what I mean by that is essentially we set up this API that has a bunch of endpoints. Now, these endpoints are essentially almost like commands, or you can think of them as just requests. And when this endpoint gets hit, when someone hits that endpoint, so they go to it, they connect to it, they send a request to that endpoint will return a response based on the request that was given. So, for example, if the request was give me all of the views that are on a specific video, then the response would be the number of views that were on that video. Let's say that video didn't exist, then maybe the response would be something like 404, not found, right? We could not find what you were looking for. So that's just a very basic example. The reason I'm bringing up that is because what we're actually going to be building in this video is kind of a mock YouTube API. It's going to be very minimal. Obviously not going to have all of the features of YouTube, but we're going to be dealing with channels and videos and essentially coming up with some kind of API, REST API, that can not only create new videos, but can give us information about videos, can delete videos, can update them, and can link those videos to channels. So we're going to start by building a very basic API that just does something like return information to us, and then we'll make one that actually allows us to create new information, update information. We'll then put that into some kind of database. Then we'll deal with custom objects. And while this video will be long, but it will cover pretty much everything you need to know to actually make a fully functioning web service and RESTful API. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So before we can actually get started writing any code, we need to install some requirements in our Python environment. Now, if you guys are experienced with this, I'm going to assume you already know what to do. I have a requirements.txt file in the description right now. You can go ahead and download that and simply install that. But for those of you that haven't used pip before, or you just don't know what I'm talking about, essentially what we need to do is install some Python modules, and we do that through a command line tool called pip. Now, by default, pip should be installed in your system, and you should be able to use it. You can use pip by typing pip in your terminal or in your command prompt, or by typing pip3. Now, if for some reason this doesn't work, first make sure you have Python installed, and if you do have Python installed and that's not working, you need to configure pip on your system so that it's working correctly. So I'll leave a link in the description as well as a card in the top right hand corner. Follow along with that video. It's titled How to Install Pygame, but that will show you how to fix your pip. Now, once that's working, we need to install three things. We need to install Flask, Flask RESTful, and the request module. Now, to keep this easy for all of us, what I would like you guys to do is go to the description and click on the link that says download requirements.txt, or there'll be something that says requirements.txt. That should download this txt file for you, and I want you to put that in the same location as where you're going to be writing your Python code. So in some kind of folder or some area that you can easily find, maybe on your desktop or something like that. So once you have this file, requirements.txt, that has this content in it here in some location on your desktop or somewhere that you can find it, what I want you to do is navigate to that from your Windows Explorer or from Mac OS. So I'll say both ways here, but I am on Windows, so I'm going to illustrate how to do this. So you can see that right now I've navigated into the folder that has my requirements.txt. Now, a shortcut to open up the command prompt in this directory is to type cmd right in this little bar up top. So delete everything there and type cmd. And notice that when that opens cmd, the path that's right here that I'm highlighting will be the path to the requirements.txt file. This is the goal. You just need to make sure this path matches. You can also use something called change directory. So change directory will allow you to select the folder or the location that you want to move to. So if I say cd and then I type Flask REST API tutorial like that. I've gone through those options by hitting tab. You can see that it will move me into that folder, and now I'll be in the right location. So just make sure this matches. If you're on Mac and you've navigated to the right location, what you can do, I believe, is right click and click open terminal or something like that. And then you should be in the correct location to be able to do this. Otherwise, just use change directory from opening up a terminal to get into the correct directory where your requirements.txt file is, and then you should be good to go. So now what we're going to do is type pip or pip3, depending on if you're on Mac or Linux or Windows. We're going to type pip install -r and then requirements.txt. So this is the command. You might need to change this again to pip3 if you're on Mac or Linux, and then go ahead and hit enter. What this will do is take all of the lines that I have inside of requirements.txt and automatically install that module into your Python environment. This way, we're all on the same page, we're using the same versions, and hopefully everything should be okay. So anyways, once you've done that, we're good to go. Let's go to an empty Python file. You can just make one. I'm going to call mine main.py, and let's start actually writing some code. So please just make sure that you have all of those installed. Again, that's Flask, RESTful, Flask, and the request module. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say from Flask import Flask with a capital F, and then we're going to say from Flask _ RESTful import API and import resource. Now, these are the two main things we need to use. Are the two main modules we're going to be using here. We'll import some other things later, but the first thing we need to do is actually create an app within Flask. So this is common. This is what you usually do when you make a new Flask app. You say app equals Flask and then _ name _ So there's two underscores there. Make sure you don't miss that. And then next, we're going to type API equals API, and we're going to put app inside of here. This is pretty much saying we're going to wrap our app in an API, and this just initializes the fact that we're using a RESTful API. Once we've done that, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go down to the very bottom of our program, and we're going to say if _ name _ equals, and then in double quotation marks _ main _ then we're going to say app.run debug equals true. This is going to actually start our server and start our Flask application. And the fact that debug equals true will say that, hey, this is in debug mode. So we're going to see all of that output and any logging information. So if anything goes wrong, we'll actually know why. If you're ever running this in a production environment, please do not run with debug equals true. This is only when you're running in a development environment and you're testing things like we are right now. Okay, so once we've done that, just going to open up a command prompt window here. I'm going to go and I'm actually going to run this main.py application and make sure that this is working. Now you can run this from wherever you'd like, but I'm just going to run mine using Python main.py. I'm doing this from the command line, and you can see that I'm in the right directory where that main.py script is. So running Python main.py will actually use Python to run that file. Again, if you're on Mac or Linux, this might be Python 3. Really depends. So now we can see it says running on HTTP 127.0.0.1:5000. So this is actually the URL that our server or our API is currently running on. So this means that whenever we send a request, we're going to send it to this location right here, and then whatever else going after the slash. So this is just your localhost location. You can change this if you want, but just make sure this is working first, and then we should be good to go. Okay, so now that that's working, what we're going to do is we're going to continue, and we're actually going to make our first what we call resource within this API. Now, this is pretty easy to do, but what we're going to do is make a class. We're going to call this class whatever we want, whatever kind of makes sense, whatever information it's going to return to us. And in this case, I'm just going to call mine hello world. Now, this is just a basic example. We'll get more complicated later. But inside of hello world, what we're going to do is we're going to inherit from resource. Essentially, what this is saying is we're going to make a class that is a resource, and this resource will have a few different methods that we can override on it that will let us do things like handle a get request, handle a put request, handle a delete request. That is what we write inside of here. So don't worry if you're not familiar with classes, but the idea is we define what we call get inside of here. So I can define get like that, and I can put self in here, and then this is what will happen when a get request is sent to a certain URL that we'll talk about in a second. So anyways, we're going to define get, and inside of here, all I'm going to do right now is return a Python dictionary that simply says hello world inside of it like that. Now, again, this might not be completely valid, but it's totally fine. It's just for this example. What I've done is made a resource called hello world. We've overridden the get method, which means this is what will happen when we send a URL or send a get request, to a specific URL. And then when that happens, we're going to return the information hello world. So let me go here now. And what I'm going to do is actually register this as a resource. So I'm going to say API dot add resource, and then inside of here, resource, I'm going to put the name of the class that I want to add. So essentially what I'm saying is, since this is a resource, let's add this to the API, and let's make it accessible through what URL. So right now I'm just going to put /, which just stands for default URL, but let's say we only want to access this when the user types hello world or sends a request to hello world. Then I would use hello world as my endpoint here. So essentially, we're determining what the root of this resource is going to be. So how do we find this resource when we send a request to the server that we're running on? So that's what we're talking about here. So that's what we've done. We've said API.add resource hello world, and then we've said that's going to be accessible at /hello world. What that means is if we send a get request to /hello world, it should return the information hello world. So to actually test that, what I'm going to do is make a new file. And I'm going to call this one test.py. Go ahead and do this as well if you'd like to. You can also do this in a Python interactive console, but since we're going to do this a few times, I'm going to make it in its new file. And what I'm going to do inside of here is actually send a request. So I'm going to import the request module from Python. This lets us send, post request, put request, get request, whatever it may be. And inside of here, I'm going to define, first of all, what our base URL is going to be, which is http://127.0.0.1:5000/. And that's what my base URL is. So that essentially is the location of the API. That's the server that it's running on. And recall that we got that because we were looking here and it said running on. This is what you want to put where I'm putting base here. That's essentially what we want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say response equals request dot get, and inside of here I'm going to put the base URL plus hello world. Essentially what I'm saying is I want to send a get request to the URL that is base plus that. So we'll send it to that /hello world. And then I want to take that response. And what I want to do is I actually want to print the response .json. Now, the reason I have to do .json is just because I need this to not look like a response object and to actually be some kind of information. So this .json method will do that for us. So let's actually go ahead and see what happens when we run test.py. The way we're going to do that is just by running two command prompt windows here. So I'm going to start by running our API or running our Flask server. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and run this test.py, and I'll show you what happens. And we seem to have gotten an error here. Object of typeset is not JSON serializable. I know the issue here. That was my bad. Sorry, inside of this get here, what we're going to do is instead of just having hello world, we're going to say data : hello world. So I just need to make a key value pair here when we're returning from the get request. I thought we would have to do that, but I wanted to try with just the hello world. So anyways, let's give this a shot now. So I was just watching back the video while editing, and I realized I missed out on a pretty important explanation, so I wanted to patch it in here. Essentially, what I want to say is that every time that we return some type of information from our API, we need to make sure that information is serializable. Now, that's a big word. A lot of people probably don't understand what that means, but you're going to see that when I pass information back, or return information, I'm doing it inside of a Python dictionary. Now, the reason for that is because this kind of represents what we call a JSON format. Now, JSON is just literally Python dictionaries. You have keys and you have values. You could have something like data that could store another dictionary, and then inside of here you could have like name, and that stores Tim, whatever, right? This is like a JSON format. And essentially, we're going to be returning JSON serializable objects. So what we need to do is make sure we're returning Python dictionaries or something else that is serializable. So just so you understand and you realize that I can't just simply return the string hello world. Actually, that will probably work, but there's a few things that I just can't return from my API or that will give me all kind of errors because they're not JSON serializable. So just ensure that when you're returning something from your REST API, it's JSON serializable. If you don't understand what that means, you can look that up. But the rule of thumb is if you want it to work, just use a Python dictionary like this, make some key, and then have some value, and you should be good to go. My apologies for not having that in the original video, but hopefully that clears it up for any of you guys that are wondering as we go through. So let's go back here. I think the server is still running. And by the way, when you run the server in debug mode, when you save it automatically updates. So that's why that's happening. We'll go to Python test.py, and now we'll see what we actually get when we refresh this. So we can see that what that actually returned to us over here is data hello world. And it showed us that there was a GET request sent to /hello world and 200, which means okay. So when you see a status 200, that means everything was okay. Nothing crashed. Now I can do this as many times as I like, right? I can keep running these requests. And every single time that I run Python test.py, we're going to get a result that says data hello world. Perfect. There we go. So that is the basics of making a Flask API. Of course, we're going to continue, but that's how you make a resource. You go ahead, you define a resource like that, you override whatever methods you want to happen on this resource. So in this case, we want a get method. And there you go. When you send a GET request, it will return whatever you go ahead and put here. Now let me go back to test.py here, and I want to show you what happens when I send a post request rather than a GET request. So let's go back to our command prompts. The server is still running, as you can see there. I'm going to run Python test.py, and notice that what it says here is message. This method is not allowed for the requested URL. So we actually got an error that was automatically handled by Flask that told us, hey, nope, you can't do that. We don't have a post method overridden here on our main.py. In our hello world resource, so that doesn't work. But if I go ahead here and say define post, and I put self, and let's just return this same information here. Let's actually return data, and we'll just say posted like that. And let's see what happens now when we actually run this. So let's bring this back up. Python test.py, and there we go, we get data posted. So when we override the correct method and use the correct method, we're good, and that works. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to deal with storing data on this server and understanding how we can pass information through the request, because it's not extremely useful to just get back some dictionary like this that just says data and then whatever information is here. What we probably want to do is return some specific information, or we want them to ask for some specific thing, right? They're probably not just going to send one general request that can give them everything they want. So what I'm going to show you now is how we can actually pass arguments or pass kind of parameters through the request URL. So if I look here at /hello world, what I can actually do is define a parameter that I want to be passed in. Now to do this, what you do is use these angle brackets like I have here. You define the type of the parameter that you want to come in. In this case, I'm going to say string, but you could do int like that if you wanted to. I believe you could do Boolean as well. But I'm going to put ints like this, or sorry, not int, string, defining that, hey, I want this parameter to be a string. I'm going to put a colon, then I'm going to define the name of this parameter, which in this case, I'm just going to say is name. What this essentially says is I want the user to type some string after hello world. We're going to pass that in to our request here. So in this case, I'm going to go and I'm going to say name like that. And what that means is now inside of this GET request, I'll be able to access whatever name they typed here, and I can do something specific with that. So right now, all I'm going to do is just return that name back to them just to show you how this works. But the idea is that we can create parameters, and technically I can make another parameter if I wanted to. Like I go ahead and do int and just say, test or something like that. And I'll actually show you how this one works. Now we have name and we have test, and I'll just go and I'll say test, and we'll just put test like that. Instead of data, actually, let's just put name, and then this way we can see what these two are. So now if I want to send a request to hello world, I need to pass not only a name, but I also need to pass some number for test. So I'm just going to go Tim, and I'm going to go 19, just going with my name and my age. All right, so let's go ahead and do that, and let's run these two things now and see how this works. So we can see that the server is automatically refreshing because it's in debug mode, so I don't need to run that again. Now I'm going to go to Python test.py, just refresh that there, and oops, we can't use a post request anymore. We need to use a get request. My apologies on that. So let's go back here and run this one more time. Okay, so Python test.py, and we get name Tim test19 because that is the information that we sent, and that was the information we got back. So that is the basics of making parameters inside of here. Again, the reason we might do that is so that we can have the user kind of ask for one specific thing, right? So now they're going to pass hello world. Let's just keep it at name for now. We don't need anything else. And what I'll do is I'm actually going to make an object up here that says names, okay? So we're going to say names equals, and we're just going to make a dictionary. And what we're going to get the user to do now is when they send us a name, we'll return to them any information relating to the name that they asked for. So let me just go inside of here and let me go Tim, and let's just go colon, and let's make another bit of information here. We'll say age 19. We'll say gender male. And then what we'll do is we'll just, oops, that's not what I wanted. We'll make another one here. So we'll say instead of Tim, we'll say Bill. We'll go age 70, and we'll go gender male again. So what I'm doing is just putting some information inside of a dictionary here that we can access. And now when they say get, what I'll actually do is I'll return names of name like that. So now we'll take whatever name they pass in, and we'll give them some information relating to that name. So let's go to test now. Let's change this just to be Tim, and let's now test this out and see if this is working. So if we go here, oops, let's go Python. Name male is not defined. Oops, I need to put that in a string. My bad, guys. So male needs to go inside of quotation marks like that. Okay, so now we should be good to go. Let's see if the Flask server is running. Okay, we're good. Let's run test.py, and there we go. We get information, so we get age 19, gender male. Now let's go ahead and change the name here instead of Tim to be Bill. Oops, not nil. I want that to be Bill. And let's run this now. And we can see that we get age 70, gender male. So that is the basics of how that works in terms of passing parameters and returning information. Now we're going to start kind of creating what I was talking about before, which is this video system or this YouTube kind of like program, right? Or API or whatever you want to call it. So instead of hello world now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make another class, and I'm going to call this class video. This is going to inherit from resource again, and we're going to have a get inside of here that has a self and a video underscore ID. Now, what I'm going to do is instead of names, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say videos equals, and we're going to make a kind of empty dictionary like this that's going to store all of our videos. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return videos of video ID. So essentially, when you send a get request to whatever URL that we're about to define here, you will get any information about the video that has the video ID that you asked for. So what do we need to do then? We need to add a resource to our API. So we're going to say api.addResource. The resource is going to be video, and the key is going to be /video/int:\video ID. There we go. So now, whenever we send information to this request, we need to pass a video ID, and we'll do something with that. Now, instead of just having a get, though, what I actually want to do is I want to make a way for us to create a new video. So we're going to say, actually, put right here. So define put. We're going to say self and video underscore ID as well. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a video inside of this put. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, what information do we need for a video, first of all? That's the first thing we need to define is kind of like, okay, when we make a new video, what do we need about that video? Are we going to have something like the views, the likes, the dislikes? Is that information we want to store? Do we want to store how old it is, what time it was uploaded at? All of that, right? How do we do that? Well, this is where we're going to start talking about something called argument parsers. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and just write a return just so we have something going on here. But we need a way to essentially create a new video. So we're going to make it so that they have to pass certain information that's not actually inside of here. So not right inside of the URL, but inside of the data. So when you send a request, let's go to our test script here. What you can actually do is if I change this to say a put request, I can pass data in the form of say JSON or some other format here that will actually get sent alongside of my request. So rather than just having all the information we want stored directly inside of the URL, which anyone can kind of see and look at, we can send information through data. So I could send something like likes 10 like that. And essentially, I just want to show you the way that we can actually get data from a request like this, right? So if I'm sending likes 10, how do I actually get this information in my request over on this side? Well, the way you do that first is by importing request up here. So from Flask, import Flask, request. Now, request is the request object. It can be used inside of resource. And essentially what it will do is give us any of that information. So it can give us stuff like any of the data that was sent here. There's some other things that we can access on request too, like the method, for example. Like if I type request dot and I believe method, that will tell us that this was a put because, well, we're inside of the put class, or inside the put method, sorry. But anyways, if I want to look at the data that was sent, what I'm going to do here is just print, and we'll just say request.form. Now, that data that we sent here comes in what's known as a form, and we can access the likes, we can access any of the other keys here by doing something like request.form and then putting likes here. Now, what that will do is give us the value 10 because we sent a form that has the key likes associated with the value 10. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'll just print request.form so you can see what it looks like, and you can get the idea of that is actually how this information is being sent. So this is the server on my left. I'm going to run this. Sometimes I have to just click over here to get this to work. And we can see a mutable multi-dict, and we have likes, 10 showing up here. So obviously not a format most of us are probably familiar with, but it does store that information. And again, if I wanted to grab that, I could use likes. Now that's fine, that's okay, but it's actually a lot easier way to do this rather than use request. In fact, Flask RESTful comes built in with this thing called a request parser, which essentially makes sure that when we send a request, we pass the information that we need with that request. So what we can do is we can actually say video underscore put underscore, I'm just going to call this args, equals request parse like that, dot, and then in this case, it's request parser. Now, we just put the brackets like this here to instantiate that, but what this is saying is we're going to make a new request parser object, and what this request parser object will do is automatically parse through the request that's being sent and make sure that it fits the kind of guidelines that we're about to define here and has the correct information in it. If it does, it will actually allow us to grab all of that information really easily by using a method called parse args. You'll see that in a second, but just follow along with me here. The idea is that say every time we want to create a new video, we want to have 3 different fields. So we want to have like the likes, we want to have the name of the video, and then maybe we want to have, I don't know, what else did we have on here? The views, how many views are on that video. Well, if we want to make sure that these 3 pieces of information are sent to us, we need some way to validate that, right? So this request parse here that we're using, so video put args, is going to do that for us. So what we do is we'll go video put args dot add argument. And what this says is this is one more thing that we want. This is something we need to be sent with it. So what we're going to do is put the name of the argument, which is essentially going to be the key that needs to be sent. We're going to put name. We'll put the type that we want this argument to be. In this case, I want the name of the video to be a string, so I'm going to put str. We're just writing Python data types here, so you could do int, string, boolean, so on. And then you can put a help value. And what the help value says is what we should display to the sender if they don't send us this name argument. So it essentially is like an error message that we're going to put here. So we'll just say this is the name of the video. So this is going to tell us that, hey, you didn't send name. This argument is the name of the video. You need to send it. And Flask will automatically handle sending error requests to the sender if that occurs, if the request parser does not find the arguments that we need. So what I'm going to do now is just copy this, and I'm just going to paste it 2 more times, because what we're going to do is we're going to now have names, or sorry, not names. We're going to have name, views, and likes as mandatory arguments. And now these are going to be both ints, and we're just going to put, instead of name of video, we'll say views of video, and then we'll just say likes on the video. Views of the video, likes on the video. Yeah, that makes enough sense to me. Okay, so now we have a request parser that has these 3 arguments that are mandatory to be sent. These are the types of the arguments, and these are the help strings that will show up if we don't send that valid argument. So now inside of put, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say args equals, and in this case, we're going to do video put args dot parse args. Now this is going to get all of these arguments, that's what args stands for, arguments, from here, and if they're not in there, so if they weren't sent, it'll automatically send back an error message. So what I can do now is just print out args, or actually let's just send a response back that is video ID : args, and we'll be able to have a look at what args actually is. Yeah, so that should be good. For now, we'll get it to add into videos later, but I just want to make sure that this is working first before we do anything else. So now, when we send a request, I'll leave it like this for now to show you what happens when we send an invalid one, and then I'll send a valid one after. So you notice that we didn't send anything to do with views or to do with the name of the video. We just have likes. So, oops, so I can open this up. Okay, let's have a look at this now. So Python test.py, and whoa, what happened? We got a huge ton of errors. Well, that is because, first of all, we did not send the correct thing. Forcibly closed. Let me send that one more time. There we go. Okay, so now we get 1, name, none, views, none, likes, 10. Okay, so sorry, I don't know what happened up there. I think it's just because the server needed to refresh. But the idea is this was the response that we got when we didn't send the name and the views. Now, the reason it didn't crash is because we didn't make these arguments required, which I'll show you how to do in 1 second. But notice that that argument parser automatically made these none because we didn't send anything with them, and it made likes 10. So the response from our API here was the video ID args inside of a dictionary, and args, of course, was a dictionary that had those arguments. Now, let's say we actually want this to crash when we don't send the correct arguments. Then what we need to do is make this required. So you can say required equals true inside of all of these add arguments, and this will make sure that now instead of sending that valid response back with none as the key for all, or none as the value for all those keys, it will actually just crash, or it'll show us an error message. So let's run this now, and notice we get message, name of video. So this is pretty much telling us, hey, this was the argument that you sent. This was invalid, right? This just didn't happen. And in fact, inside of this help string here, what we should probably do is say name of the video is required, right? Just to make sure that they actually understand that. But anyways, you get the point. What it did is it sent us a message that said, hey, name, this is the key or the argument that we're looking for, and this was the help string associated with it, and we would not have created a new video if that had happened. So anyways, that is kind of the basics on that. Now that we understand how that works, let's actually start adding videos and then being able to get videos, making this a bit more functioning, and then we'll talk about delete videos and add a few other things as well. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add a new video in from the put request. So let's say args are valid. We don't get that error message happening. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say videos video underscore ID equals args. Now, since args is a dictionary of its own, it's totally fine to just do that. And now what we can simply return is just, I guess, whatever we want here actually. So I'm just going to return videos video underscore ID. And what I'm going to return beside this is actually a code. So what you can do if you want to return a specific status code to the person who's sending the request is inside of the return statement, after you return the data that you want, you can simply return some code. So 201 stands for created. So I'm going to send 201 as a response back so that they can see that, hey, this was created. That worked fine. You don't have to send these. By default, it sends what's known as 200, which is the one for OK, which just meant, nothing broke. But there's a bunch of other status codes that you could send depending on what you're doing. So anyways, I'm going to send 201 to show the person that it was created. And let's go ahead and test this now, because now we can actually use a get and put request, and we can see how they work together. So what I'm going to do is say response equals request.put. we'll print out that. And then I'm just going to copy this again, and I'm going to put an input in between so we can kind of pause it, and I can press enter first. And now I'm going to actually send a get request, and I'm going to look for video/1. So the idea here is what I've done is I've said whatever video ID they pass here in the put request, like as the actual, what do you want to call it, argument, or as the parameter, whatever it is in after the slash, we're going to make that the video ID. So that's going to be the key inside this dictionary. And we're going to associate that with the arguments that they pass as kind of the data, right, that was sent. Then that way we can return what if they have the video ID, that video ID back to them. And since they created it, they would know what that video ID is. So anyways, that's fine. We'll just do that. And let's go and have a look at this. Okay, so now the server should be running. We'll run python test.py. We get message, name of video is required. Forgot about that. Good job we have those messages because I need to add a name, which we'll just put as Tim, and then we'll need to add views, which we'll just put as 100,000 for right now. So let me refresh this one more time. Okay. Oops, server crashed on us there. Let me just rerun this. It's because the key didn't exist. That's fine. But let's go python test.py. Now we can see name, Tim, views 100,000, likes 10, and then I'll press enter, and we get name, Tim, views 1,000, likes 10. The reason that's meaningful is because I sent a get request. That get request asked for ID 1, and then that returned to us whatever was stored inside of videos that had ID 1. Okay, so I'm confident that most of that is working now. The next thing I want to do is actually fix this error that we just ran into over here, with this whole big whack of code that was happening in this key error 1. And I want to make sure that we actually don't crash if we ask for a video which ID does not exist, right? Because if I try to access video ID 1 from videos and it's not there, then of course our program's going to crash. So how do we avoid that? Well, what I can actually do is define a function. I can say abort if underscore video underscore ID doesn't exist. This is a long name for a function. You can use whatever you want, but I'm going to say abort if video ID doesn't exist. I'm going to put video ID in here. And what I'm going to say is if video ID not in videos, which is the variable we're using to store the videos, then I'm going to say abort like that. And what I'm going to do now is import abort from Flask RESTful. Abort essentially will send an error message back saying whatever you put here. So we're going to say video ID is not valid, ... like that. So essentially this will just abort. So whenever you see the abort function like this, whenever that is called, it just immediately returns a response back that says, hey, this crashed, this didn't work. So we can just call abort like this, and that return statement will be skipped. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do now is inside of guest, I'm going to call, or inside of guest, inside of get, I'm going to call abort if video ID does not exist. And then inside of here, I'm going to simply put video ID, and that should be good. So this will make sure that that video ID exists before we actually go ahead and do that return, so we can avoid crashing the program. So let's go back over to the server now and to our test script, and let's go test. Let's get rid of this first one here because we don't need that. We can get rid of the input, and let's try to look for video ID 6 and see what happens now if we do that. So obviously video ID 6 doesn't exist. So if I run python test.py, what happened here? We got some kind of error. Let me just have a look here. All right, so I noticed the error here. I forgot that I actually need to send what's known as a status here. So before I can actually send the message, which is this, which I'm actually going to define by saying message equals, this is correct now, we need to send a status code. So if we abort, we need to send a status code. 404 stands for like could not find. You know, when you see 404 page not found, we're going to say message video is not valid, or we could say could not find video. Now, to give you an example of some more status codes, there's a status code 409. That means video already exists, or like thing already exists. I'm just using video because that's our example. There's a whole bunch of other status codes, and if you want to know them, I'd recommend you look them up. So anyways, let's run this one more time. It's common to make a few errors here. Go python test.py, and now we get message, could not find video, status code 404, which we can see right here. So that's good now. So now we have video kind of somewhat working. The next thing I want to do is I want to implement another method for deleting a video, and I also want to make sure that we don't create a video that already exists. So let's go with delete video first. I'm just going to define delete. Notice that the name of my methods match the HTTP methods that I'm accommodating. So we have get, put, delete. You don't have to use these for what they're actually meant to do, if that makes sense. But it's common practice to use put to create something, to use delete to delete something, and use get to return something. There's also one called patch that we'll use later, which allows you to update something. So we're going to say delete self. And then what we're going to do in here is we're going to say video underscore ID. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that this exists. So first I'm going to make another method here. I'm going to say define abort underscore if underscore video underscore exists. And inside of here, I'm going to say video underscore ID. I'm going to say if video ID in videos, then we'll abort. We're going to abort with a 409 status code, which stands for this already exists. We're going to say message equals video already exists with that ID. And we'll do ... for that as well. Oh, so now what I'm going to do is inside of I'm going to put abort if video exists. So abort if video exists like that. We'll pass the video ID. This is just to make sure that we don't create a video that already exists, right? So we're going to abort if it exists. And then inside of delete, I'm going to say abort if video doesn't exist, if I can find where that one was. Abort underscore if video ID doesn't exist, video ID. Then if it does exist, we're going to say del videos video ID, and then we can simply return this comma 204. 204 stands for deleted successfully. So this is just a blank string. I don't want any message. I just want to send a status code 204 that essentially says, hey, that worked. You were able to delete this. Okay, so now that we have that, things are looking pretty good. Let's do a few tests here with some different requests and just make sure that everything seems to be okay. So let's do one here. Response request.put. Let's put video with ID. Let's go 3. We could do that. That's fine. And let's actually just send a bunch of requests here that have some different information. So I'm just going to say data equals that. Actually, data equals a list. And then inside of this list, I'm just going to fill up a bunch of different information here. And we'll just make a bunch of videos so that we can do some more interesting queries. Okay, oops, I wanted to go enter there. Just trying to get this list to be somewhat organized so that we can read this a bit easier. Okay, so tab. There we go, and we'll just do 3 videos for now. So likes, let's go 78, name, let's go Joe. I mean, name, this really should be the name of the video. Let's just go how to make REST API. Views, well, this is going to have a lot more likes, hopefully. And then we'll go views, 80,000 or something like that. And then we can leave this Tim one the same, but let's just make it a different amount of views. Let's make it 2,000. Let's give it 35 likes. Now what I'm going to do is just send a bunch of requests. I'm going to say for I in range. I guess this is going to be the len of data. What we'll say is, and we'll just use all of this. Okay, so response equals request.put base video slash plus string I, because this is going to be whatever I is, that'll be the ID we pass. And then instead of that, we're going to go data I. Awesome. We'll print the response.json. And then at the very end here, we'll actually go through and we'll delete 1 or 2 of them. So we'll say response equals request.get. Let's go base plus, and instead of get, this is actually going to be delete. We'll go base plus video slash 0. I know that one will be there. And then let's print out the response.json. So let's go print response.json. All right, so what I'm doing is just sending a bunch of requests with different information that is stored in here. I'm going to delete one of them, and then I'm going to try to get to video 2. And let's just see how that looks. I'll add some inputs here. Okay, so run. I think this is refreshed. Yes, the server's going now. Let's run test.py and see what we get. Okay, so first we got all these successfully, and then something happened. Expecting value 1, align column 1. I can't see exactly what that, it's because I'm trying to do a response.json from something that doesn't have any JSON data being attached to it. So sorry about that, guys. Essentially, the reason that I just got that error there was because on this side, I had .json after my response. But notice though, when I have a request that is the delete method, we don't actually return anything that's kind of a JSON serializable object. We just return a blank string. So that means we're not going to be valid to be able to use .json, so we just have to use response. So now let's try this one more time. Let's first just rerun this server, just clear the memory there. So python main.py, and then we'll go python test.py. Notice this works fine. Let me hit enter. We get response 204, that works fine. And then name Tim, views 2000, likes 35. When we query for ID, I believe it was 2 or 3 or something like that. Anyways, you get the point. That works successfully, and our API is functioning pretty well. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to do now is actually add this to a real database. So rather than using just memory like we're using right now in videos, how can we actually get this to store in a persistent database? We're just going to use Flask SQL-Alchemy with a, I believe it's a SQLite database. So I'm going to set a little bit of stuff up, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're going to add the database. So to do that, what we need to do is actually first install another module called Flask SQL-Alchemy. This just gives us a really nice interface to work with databases. It's kind of similar to what Django uses as well, and it's just a very popular way for databases inside of Flask. Now, if you installed using the requirements.txt method, so you did pip install -r requirements.txt, you already have that installed. If you didn't, then you're going to need to go back to your command prompt. You need to type pip install Flask -SQL-Alchemy like that. I believe that's how you spell it. So SQL-Alchemy. Yeah, it should be correct. So pip install Flask SQL-Alchemy. Make sure that's installed in your system. Again, that might be pip 3, depending on what system you're on. And once you have that, we should be good to go and actually start initializing this database. So inside of our code, we're going to say from Flask SQL-Alchemy, import SQL-Alchemy. Then we're going to say DB, which stands for database, equals SQL-Alchemy app. So again, same thing that we did with API here, just wrapping app. And then what we're going to do before this actually is we're going to make a config. So we're going to say app.config. So we're changing the configuration settings. And we're going to add this one here, which is SQL-Alchemy, like that. So you're going to spell it like that, although in all capitals. So alchemy, and then underscore database underscore URI. So essentially, we're going to define what we want the location of our database to be, so where we want it to be. And the way that works is we do SQLite : 3 slashes like that, and then the name of the database. So we're going to say database.db. So essentially, we're saying the configuration here, we're going to do SQL-Alchemy database URI is equal to, and then whatever the name of the database is. Now, say you wanted to save that within a folder inside of the path you're currently on, you would do something like tmp/database.db, and that would store it in a temp folder, assuming you had created one inside of your current directory. This is known as a relative path, which means it creates it based on the current path that it's in. So when we say database.db, we're just going to make a database.db file in the same directory as our current script. All right, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to type db.createAll. Now, what this is going to do is actually create the database. Now, we only do this once. So after we run this script this first time and it actually creates and initializes the database, we're not going to, We're not going to do this ever again. Now, the reason for that is because once we create the database, we don't want to reinitialize it, because if we do that, we're going to override the tables or the data we already have in there. Now, the only thing is we don't want to do this until we've actually defined the models that we want to have in our database. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start coding out a model to store videos. So I'm going to say class video model. This is going to inherit from model, which I'm going to import up here with a capital. So from SQL-Alchemy, import model like that. And then, well, actually, sorry, what am I saying? Don't import model. What I'm going to do in here is say db dot model. So my bad, we're not importing anything up here. We're just going to use the db that we created right here, stands for database, db dot model. Now what we can do here is actually define all of the fields that we want to have inside of our video model. So the first one that I'm going to do is have ID. So I want to store some kind of ID in my video model. That's obviously going to be the ID of the video. So I'm going to say db.column like that. And then inside of here, I'm going to say db.integer because that's going to be an int value. And we're going to say primary key like that equals true. Now I'm not going to be going through too much database related stuff, but essentially a primary key means that this is a unique identifier. So it means this ID will be different for every single video that we store in this database. So that's something to keep in mind. Next thing we're going to do is say name equals db.column. A column is just one column of information. So inside of a database, we have multiple columns for each model. We have tables. Inside of those tables, we have columns. Each row is an entry or one kind of object of that table, if that makes any sense, or of that model, whatever you want to call it. So here we'll say db, and this is going to be db.string. We're going to put how many characters we want to potentially have in the string. I think the max amount of characters for a YouTube video is 100. So let's just go with 100. And then we're going to say unique. No, that's not true. We'll say nullable equals false. Now, the reason we do this is essentially to say that this field has to have some information. We're never going to have a YouTube video that doesn't have some kind of name. So if you make nullable equals true, that means that you can insert something into this model that doesn't have a name. But we want to always have a name, so we're going to say nullable equals false. The next thing we need after name is we need the views. So this one's going to be very similar to the first column. So we're going to say views equals db dot column. This is going to be a db dot integer. This is going to be nullable equals false. We're going to copy this again for the likes. So we'll say likes equals db.column, db.integer, nullable equals false. And finally, we're just going to define a repr method, just so if we print this out, we actually get something that's somewhat valid. So define underscore underscore repr underscore underscore. We're going to put a self, and what we're going to do is we're going to return an f string. By the way, this f string only works in 3.6 and above. So if you're not in 3.6, don't do what I'm doing here. Just try to come up with your own way for it. I'm going to say video, and inside of here, I'm going to say name equals name. I'm going to say views equals views, and I'm going to say likes equals likes. Now this essentially, whenever you have an f string and you put something inside of curly brackets, it will just actually print the value out for that variable or for the expression inside of the curly braces. So we'll get name equals then whatever the name is, views equals whatever the views is, and we can pad this out just so that it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so this repr also just only happens when you decide to print the representation of this object, or you decide to look at it internally, however you're going to decide to do that. This will just give you a string representation, so we can actually see what all these videos look like. Okay, so now that we have a video model, we can go ahead and do db.createAll right after we make this model, and that will make a database for us that has this model inside of it. So what we're going to do is go, and we're going to run our script here. So we're going to say Python main.py, and there we go. Go ahead, it creates that model for us, and we should be good to go after that. So after we've done that, we're going to make sure we delete db.createAll because we don't want to do that a second time, or that's going to override the data in our database, and that should be pretty much it. Now we have the database set up and created, and we're ready to actually start working with it. Now, to actually make a new object in the database is really easy. What you do is just make a new instance of this class that has all of the valid things that we need, and then simply just commit it to the session, I believe. I'll show you how we do that in just 1 second, but I'm going to start by removing some of this stuff. So first of all, I'm going to remove videos like that. I'm going to remove this abort right here, and we're going to start changing some of this code now to actually work persistently with the database. So the first thing we want to do is, instead of having get like this, what we're going to do, instead of returning, videos video ID, we're going to have to query the database and return something that fits the query that we have. So we'll say that the result is equal to, in this case, we're going to go video model.query.get, and then inside of here, we're going to say ID equals video ID. So essentially, we're going to look for some, model, some row, some video inside of this video model that has the ID equal to video ID, and then we're going to return that to the user. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? If I want to return this result, well, this result is actually going to be an instance of this class. Now, I know I'm going into databases and there's actually a lot to explain with Flask SQL-Alchemy, but essentially the way this works is that when you query this video model, it's going to give you instances of this video model that match whatever you put inside of here. So if I put ID equals video ID, I'm going to get any videos that have this ID. And since I'm just doing get, it's going to return to me only one, but it's going to be an instance. So how can I actually serialize that instance and return that so that my test script here that's looking for a response will actually be able to read that information? Well, this is where we use something called resource fields and Marshall width. Now, a resource field essentially is a way to define how an object should be serialized. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say resource underscore fields equals, and what I'm going to do is define what I want these fields to be. So I'm going to say ID, and then I'm going to go colon fields dot string like that. And now I'm going to go up to Flask RESTful. I'm going to import fields, and I'm going to import a decorator called Marshall underscore width. I'll define what these do in just a second, but inside of fields dot string, what I'm going to do is get rid of these brackets and just leave it like that. What I'm pretty much doing is I'm saying, okay, I want to make this dictionary here that's going to define the fields from this video model that I want to return if I return a specific object. Seems confusing. I have to keep coding for it to make more sense, but just follow with me. I'm trying to say that this ID field here, which is the name that I'm putting here, is equal to fields.string, right? Like that's the type of field that it is. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the name field, which is another one that I want to look at. I'm going to say name is equal to fields dot string. And sorry, ID should be fields dot integer. My bad on that. Name is going to be fields dot string, and then views and likes are going to be the same thing. So they're going to be fields dot integer. So fields dot integer, and then we're going to go likes. Oops. Is fields dot integer. Awesome. So now we have all of the fields defined. We have our ID as well, and we should be good to actually start using this. So what we do when we actually want to take some object, because result is going to be an object, when we have video model.query, that gives us an object of an instance video model. So what I'm going to do is above this, I'm going to say at Marshall width, and inside of here, I'm going to put resource fields. Now, what this says essentially is that when we return, take this return value and serialize it using these fields. So it's going to assume that we have an ID, name, views, and likes on the instance that's returned. It's going to take those fields and it's going to essentially serialize it into this JSON format that can be returned. So we'll create a dictionary that looks something like ID, and then whatever the ID is there, right? And then name and whatever the name is there, and views and likes and all that. That's what this decorator is doing, and you can put that above any method inside of here, inside of your class, that you want to return and have the object serialized with. So let's try that now. I'm going to get rid of put. Actually, we won't get rid of put. We'll just modify this slightly. So now inside of put, what I'm going to do is show you how we can actually make a new object in the database. So to do this, I'm going to say, let's go, I don't know, video equals video model, and then inside of here we just need to define all the fields. So we're going to say ID equals video underscore ID, name equals, and we're going to need those args. So we're going to say args equals, I believe it was video put args dot parse args. So we're going to say name equals args, and inside of here we're going to put ID, or not ID, name, and then after that we're going to say views equals args views, and then we are going to say after views, I believe that was likes equals args likes. Okay, so this is a dictionary, remember, args, that stores all of the values that we passed in. We've seen that many times. So I can access them individually like that. And well, I can just do this, and that will create a new video model. Now, if I actually want to make sure that that goes into the database, so I'm actually committing it, essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say db.session.add video. This is going to add this object to the current database session. And then what I can do is I can say db.session.commit. And what this will do is commit any of the kind of changes I've made to the session and make them permanent in the database. So right now when I say add, I'm temporarily adding this video to the database. When I say commit, I'm permanently putting it in. Then what I can do is I can return that object again. So let's say return the video like that with a 201, but I need to make sure I add this Marshall so that that gets serialized. So Marshall with resource fields. Again, that's because this is an object. I can't just return an object back. I need to turn something that's serializable, and well, this Marshall with will serialize this response and make sure I can actually return it fine. Now, delete, same thing here. We're going to have to actually do something different to delete. I'll do that after. But let's just see if this is working. I think this query might be a little bit off, but anyways, yeah, let's deal with that. So let's go to test. Let's get rid of this delete, and let's see if the put actually works at all, and then we can, yes, try to get something as well. Okay, so let's give this a shot now. Not 100% confident, but we will give it a go. Okay, so let's run this here, and let's go Python test.py. And that actually seemed to work. So we see that these three happened. It actually returned us the correct information. We can see that that serializer is working. If I hit enter here, then we actually get an issue. So get got an unexpected keyword argument ID. Okay, so we had a small problem here in this query. That's because this actually should be filter by, my apologies. So filter by video ID equals video ID, but this is actually going to be ID equals video ID and then dot first. So what this is saying, sorry, is we're going to filter all of the videos that we have by ID. We're going to look for the one that has the ID, video ID, and then we're going to return the first response in that filter, the first entry that's filtered by that. The reason we do this is because I could technically filter, say, by views, right? I can say I could filter by views equals, and I could by anything that has 10 views. And well, there might be multiple videos that have 10 views, so I can get just the first one, or I can get all of them, I believe, by doing .all. So let's do .first, and let's see how this works now. And let's go Python. And what is the error here? Expecting value, line 1, column 1, char 0. I think something happened here. Let me have a quick look. Okay, so you can see what actually happened there was that inside of our test script here, we try to add things with IDs 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, since those IDs actually already exist in the database, we're getting an integrity error here. It says unique constraint failed on ID, and it's crashing our server here. Now, the way we can avoid something like that, again, is just making sure that ID doesn't exist. So what I can say is we can check by querying the database, or we can do like a try catch to see if this worked or if it failed. But let's just go ahead and say after args, we'll say result equals video model.query.filter by ID equals video ID.first. Okay, so I just did a little testing on my own here to make sure I wasn't steering us in the wrong direction. What I'm going to do inside of here, this might not be the best way to do this, but it will work for our purposes, is I'm going to do a query and just check if there's any videos that have the ID that's equal to the video ID that we want to add. If they do, what I'm going to do is abort. So I'm just going to say if result, so like if result exists, then what I'm going to do is say abort. I'm going to abort with a 409 status code, which means this already exists. I'm going to say message equals video ID taken. ... So this way, now we won't actually crash the program. What we'll do is we'll simply send this abort message that says, hey, we already have this video ID. You can't use that, right? So let's give this a shot, and let's see what we get here if we try that. So let's go, and let's try this again. Okay, so let's go Python test.py, and notice we get message video ID taken, video ID taken, video ID taken. We can hit enter now, and then we will get the video that corresponds with ID 2. So that is the basics there on how we can handle this put. And just do a query and check if this video exists, and if it does, we can just abort. Now, same thing up here in get though. I want to make sure that we actually get a valid result before we go ahead and return it. So we're going to say if not result. So essentially, if we don't get any results for the ID, then what we'll do is we'll just abort. We'll abort with a 404, and we'll just go message equals could not find video with that ID. Perfect, that's all we need. And let's go ahead and run this now after I change the test script and try to get a video that has ID, say 6. So let's run this. I'm going to go back to my command prompt, and video ID taken, message could not find video with that ID. So that is pretty much it when it comes to actually saving things in a database and then handling some of these edge cases like, oh, the video already exists, oh, we can't find that video ID, and so on. Now, the next thing that we could do is do an update. Now, I'm just going to kind of leave this as something you guys can figure out on your own, because I think with this knowledge, you should be able to. But you can define, what's called a patch. So a patch is essentially a way to update. So it's just that HTTP method for update. I believe update is one as well. There's a bunch of different HTTP methods, or kind of, I think the methods that you can use, but we're just patch is kind of the standard when it comes to actually updating something. And what you could do is the same thing, right? So you can get all the arguments that you want to use to update a specific video, and you can actually change this video put args to be something that doesn't have required arguments. So say on an update, maybe they can pass you just the video ID. So if we go video ID like that, and then any other arguments that they want to update the video with. So maybe they just want to update the views. Well, in that case, it would be valid for them to just send you the updated views rather than sending you all the other things that they want, all the other stuff they're not even going to update, right? So if they send you just views, then what you could do is you could query the database, you could get this object, you can modify this object, you can add it back in, and you can commit. And now that I say that, let's just go ahead and do this, because why not? I'm going to make another argument parser here. I'm going to say video update args equals, and we're going to say request parse dot request parser, and we're going to say video update args like that. Oops, video, not dot, video update args dot add argument. Inside of here, we're going to add actually all the same arguments, so I can literally just copy these and I'll just change the name. So video update, and update, and then here instead of required, I'll just make all of these optional. So this way, now the user can send us whatever arguments they want, so any of these three or all of these three, and based on what they send, we will update the video with them. So this is going to be a little interesting. There's probably a better way to do this than what I'm about to attempt, but I haven't done this before, so I'm just going off the top of my head. I'm going to say args equals video underscore put underscore args dot parse args. We're going to make sure that this video exists first of all. So let's just say result equals video model dot query filter by ID video ID. We'll do the same thing here. So if result, and it's actually instead of if result, we'll say if not result, then we'll abort with a 404 and we'll say message video doesn't exist, cannot update. Perfect, that's all we need. And then after that, what we'll do down here is if we have a result, we'll actually update that result. So we'll say for arg in args. And this is going to be interesting to do because I kind of just need to check them manually. I'm trying to think of as a better way to do this than what I'm going to do, but we'll have to see here. Okay, so if this is going to be a weird way, but we'll just say if name in args, then what we'll do is we'll say video model dot name equals args name. Now, I think you guys are getting the point here of what I'm going to just literally be doing the whole time. I'm going to say if views in args, then we can say video model dot views equals args views. There's probably a way better way to do this. In fact, I can kind of think of one off the top of my head, but it's fine. We just have 3 things here. And we'll say if likes in args, then we'll say video model dot likes equals args likes. So essentially making it so that we can update everything here. Now what we'll do, since we've updated this video model, and why am I putting video model? I'm sorry, this should be result, guys. My apologies on that. We're going to say result and result. The reason I'm doing result is because I want to change this instance. I don't want to just change the model itself. So result.name, result.views, results.likes. And then what we'll do is we'll say db.session.add result. And we'll say db.session.commit like that, and then put our brackets, and then we will return just the updated object. So we're just going to return result like that, and we could return it with a status, but I don't know what the status is for updated, so I'm just going to leave that for right now. Now on patch, we're going to have to remember to add that marshal with, so we'll marshal with those resource fields, and this should be good. So let me test this out and make sure this is going to work, and then we will be good to go here. So instead of get, let's now do an update. So we already know we have these 3 added in. So we have ID 0, 1, 2. Let's just try to do an update here and see if we can get this to work. So response dot patch like that. We're going to say base plus video 2. And here for our data, we're just going to pass views equals 99. Colon 99, sorry. And let's see when we get our response back if this actually worked properly or not. So we're going to run, let's run test.py, message, name of video is required. Okay, interesting. So let me run that one more time. Name of video is required. I believe I am using the wrong argument thing here. So instead of video put args, we're going to say video update args. My bad about that, guys. Let's go back here and let's run this. And what is the problem? Let's just have a quick look. Okay, so I am back. I did a little bit of a test there and some things were going wrong. So I just figured out those errors. I want to come back and talk to you guys about what those were. So before I had db.session.add result, right? First of all, we don't need to do that anymore because I realized I was just looking at some documentation that once it's already in the database, we don't need to re-add it. We can just commit any changes we make to the object. But essentially, the main problem that I'm having here is that we have this result object, right? And I say if name in args, if view in args, if likes in args, then go result.likes equals args, result.views equals args views, so on and so forth. And we're updating the object like that, which actually works. But the problem is that name and views and likes are actually always in this argument, even if they weren't passed through. That's because what this request parser does here is it actually will automatically fill these in with the value none if they are not passed through. So what we need to do is, first of all, make sure that if we're going to update, that those values aren't none. So we're just going to change these if statements, say if name in args and args name not none. So we can actually just write if args name, and what that will do is tell us if this key is not a none value. We don't have to worry about this giving us a key error because we know that we will always have args name, args views, and args like. We know those will always be in that dictionary based on the way that the request parser works. So I'm just going to change this here to say this now, and we'll notice that this should hopefully be working when we go ahead and change this or when we run this now. So we're just making sure that these values are not none. If they're not none, we'll update the result. We'll commit those changes, and then that should be good. So let's go here. Looks like the server is automatically updated. And now if I run python test.py, we can see ID2, name Tim, views 99, likes 35. And if I go here and now I add, say, likes 101, let's see if that updates it. So let's run test.py again. And there we go. So we have views 99, likes 101. And just to prove to you that this will work even if I don't add anything, I'll add 0 data in there, or 0 data, no data, and run this, and it just stays the same as what it was before. So that is how we use a database. That is how we update the information. That's how we have the correct request parsers and everything else that I can think that you would really need to do if you're making some kind of API, especially in Flask. So I think with that, I'm going to end the video here. So this video has taken me a long time to create, quite a few errors and things I had to go through some code edge right beforehand. If you guys appreciate this effort, all I ask is that you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even leave a comment and let me know. It really does keep me going and motivated to keep making videos. So that being said, if you enjoyed, like I said, like the video, subscribe, and I will see you guys in another YouTube video.